Hi guys, and welcome back to the Watch Scientist channel. I'm Chris, and first of all I would like to wish you and everyone who watches our videos a happy new year, and thank you for the support in the year 2020. Today we have a very exciting video ahead of us, also for me personally, as we will be looking at the differences and the similarities between the Omega Speedmaster Reduced or Automatic and the Omega Speedmaster Professional or the Moonwatch. So before I roll the intro and we get started with this video, I would like to ask you to please, if you like this video, subscribe to our channel and like this video. If you have any complaints or you enjoy something specific about this video, leave it in the comments down below. Let's roll the intro. So let's get this video started. If you're more interested in an in-depth review of the Omega Speedmaster Reduced, if you're trying to decide which one to get, I will leave a link to that video in the description down below and also in the top hand corner on this video. But in today's video, I would like to compare both of these watches, look at the differences and similarities, and maybe help you decide on which one to get if you love the Speedmaster. So let's start this video off with getting to know the Speedmaster Professional more in depth. As you can see here with this huge box, you can already tell that the Speedmaster is a very important line for the Omega watch brand. So the Speedmaster lineup was first introduced in 1957 by Omega, and it was thought as a watch themed around motorsport, hence the tachymeter. As you may or may not know, the tachymeter is actually used with the chronograph to time and calculate your speed in, for example, a race car. But big changes came to the model line in 1965, where NASA adopted the Speedmaster as their official space watch. And the Speedmaster is the actual watch worn by astronauts when they landed on the moon in 1969. The Speedmaster was the only contender submitted to NASA that was able to withstand all their rigorous testing. And since 1966, this watch is actually referred to as the Speedmaster Professional and has a signature look of the black dial and white contrasting accents. And as you probably know, since then Omega has released many different variations, special editions, limited editions of the Speedmaster, of which also the Speedmaster Reduced or the Speedmaster Automatic. So in that sense, the Speedmaster has a lot of history and tradition to it, and I think the Speedmaster Reduced, with a smaller size and different movement, benefits somewhat of the fame of its bigger brother. So let me actually get the watch out of its huge box and we will talk a little bit about the movement. So as you can see, this is a huge box. We have an outer box made of cardboard and an inner suitcase-like box which contains the Speedmaster and, to be honest, a lot of different small goodies. So this is what the inside of this box looked like. We have a small Speedmaster emblem as well as a tiny compartment with a small loop which actually has a small tachymeter around, which is a nice little detail. And let's get this watch out. Okay, so here we have the Omega Speedmaster Professional, the actual Moonwatch. This specific watch is, as you can see, on the Omega NATO strap, which is a really high quality NATO strap. To be honest, I normally don't really like NATO straps, but this one feels really nice. Still, I wouldn't go for the NATO strap, I would probably go for the steel bracelet. So the Speedmaster, originally adopted by NASA, had the famous caliber 321, which was produced until 1968, and also a few watches in 1969. And that was also the caliber that powered the watch that actually landed on the moon, which is pretty cool. That watch, as well as this watch in my hands today, was a watch powered by a caliber based on the famous Le Mania movement, which I talked about in my video of the Speedmaster Reduced as well. What really differentiates the caliber we have in this watch today from the caliber 321 is that the caliber 321 had actually a column wheel chronograph, which is today seen a lot in some high horology pieces, as it's quite a bit more difficult to produce. You have a lot of facets you need to finish, but it also gives you a more smooth pusher feel when you activate the chronograph, and if you have an open case back, it looks beautiful. So in 1969 they changed the caliber to the caliber 861 and later to the 1861, which is also still today in the Moonwatch. The Moonwatch I have here today has a solid case back. There's also an open case back version called the Sapphire Sandwich, as it has a sapphire crystal on top as well as in the case back. This one has an Hasselite crystal, just like my Speedmaster Reduced. The open case back version has a slightly different movement, which is the 1863, which is technically the same movement. It just has some nice finishing touches like circular graining as well as Geneva stripes on the bridge. But technically and accuracy wise it's the same. The watch I have here today, as well as any other Moonwatch sold today, is a cam actuated chronograph as opposed to the column wheel based chronograph. The result is unfortunately a little rougher pusher actuation, but it's way easier to produce and way easier to service. This watch also has a so-called lateral clutch, which is the way the watch transfers its power to the chronograph module, which is really cool, which is why I added a small video here right beside me. So let's get into the differences and similarities. So let's start off with design differences. The most obvious difference between both, which is in my opinion a big difference, is the size. While the Omega Speedmaster Professional has a size that is larger than 40 millimeters, the Reduced is a little over 38 millimeters, which to be honest changes a lot about the design. So other than that, the Speedmaster Professional has a different kind of chronograph seconds hand with a small kind of arrow at the top, which I think looks really cool. The Speedmaster Reduced just has a regular stick seconds hand. When looking at the dial, which is maybe more subtle, is that the running seconds hand of the Professional is at 9 o'clock, while the running seconds hand of the Reduced is at 3 o'clock, which has something to do with the movement they both use. Moreover, the Professional has regular hour markers without any numerals, while the Reduced does have numerals, although it should be said that there's also a Speedmaster Reduced with a sapphire crystal who also has the same hour markers and looks a little more like the Professional. Another big difference is the bracelet. Of course this one doesn't have the steel bracelet on it, but the bracelet of the Reduced is a little different than the bracelet of the Professional. To be honest, I like this kind of bracelet a little more, as it reminds me of the bracelet of the Rolex Presidential, while the bracelet of the Omega Speedmaster Professional is more like the Oyster bracelet. So in my opinion, a big difference of the Professional is that you can get it with an open case back. And which I haven't talked about yet is that the Omega Speedmaster Professional actually has a hand wound movement, while the Reduced has an automatic movement. So while the Reduced doesn't have to be hand wound, it can just be wound by wearing it because of the automatic rotor that's in the movement. This one needs to be hand wound. So for me personally, an automatic movement is always more practical, not just for me, but that's just how it is. But a nice thing about hand wound movements is that there's no rotor obstructing the view of the beautiful movement. So if you would get this with a sapphire case back, you would be able to look into the beautiful Lemania based caliber. So as I said, this watch is hand wound, and as my friend told me, it's a little hard to wind it, but I have to say winding it feels really nice. You have a really nice feedback from the movement and it just sounds nice. Maybe I can show it to you on my microphone. It's just a really nice feel and it's really satisfying to wind this watch. which is a little more impractical, but you get to spend a little hands-on time with your Speedy every time you wind it up. So another big visual differences looking at the dials is that the dials on the Omega Speedmaster Reduced are way more spaced out. They lay on the outside of the dial, while the ones on the Speedmaster Professional are much more close to the center and have a more three-dimensional texture to them. So they have sloping edges, while the Reduced just has a second little lower layer for the subdials. Other than that, they are both very similar, and they both have these beautiful lugs, which was something that made me fall in love with the Speedmaster right the first time I put it on my wrist. You have the sides of the case just flow flushly on your wrist, which is, I think, such a cool design feature. So the big question, if you want to buy a Speedmaster, which one should you get? Well, it really depends on what you like. First of all, the Speedmaster Professional is obviously more expensive. Since I bought mine, the prices of the Speedmaster Reduced have considerably gone up and are a little over 2,000 euros. But if you want to get a nice professional, you will have to go, I think, in the high 3,000s. But what you get is the real Moonwatch. You don't get the smaller brother, which benefits of the fame of the bigger brother. You get the real deal. It also says Moonwatch on the case back, and you have the opportunity to get an open case back and look at a beautiful hand-wound Lemania based movement. If you're looking for practicality and a little lower price, just like I did, get the Speedmaster Reduced. You have a lot of different options. You also can get one with the sapphire crystal, which makes it more usable, and it looks also a little more like the Professional. If we're talking about usability, obviously the automatic movement is more usable. You don't really have to think about it, it just winds itself, while the hand wound movement needs to be wound every 2 or 3 days, but it feels very nice if that's something that you're interested in. That being said, I think it's a necessity to have the metal bracelet. I really like metal bracelets. They make the watch, in my opinion, just a little more serious and stable, while the NATO is a little more sporty, but just not my cup of tea. Which watch is more beautiful? So this is very difficult for me to say, as I'm obviously very biased. I own this Speedmaster Reduced, and this was my first luxury watch, so needless to say, I am still in love with this watch. And it's really difficult for me to keep an open mind in this, but looking at both of these dials, the Professional is a little more beautiful. The dial is a little more roomy, the sub-dials look a little nicer, and this chronograph seconds hand looks really cool. Obviously, the Lemania based hand wound movement is easier to finish and, in my opinion, more reliable than the modular movement in the Reduced. I've talked about this in the video about the Speedmaster Reduced. This watch uses a modular movement. It has an ETA 3-hand time-only automatic movement and a Dubois de Pras 2020 chronograph module. So you have a lot going on here, which gives more opportunities for something to go wrong, obviously. So to sum this comparison up, if you have a little higher budget and you're looking for the real deal, the Speedmaster Professional is beautiful, famous, and has a lot of history. If you have a little lower budget, or you're looking for something a little more practical and small, because this is a big thing for me as well, the Speedmaster Professional would be a little too large for me, was too expensive for me, and the automatic movement is just practical. Okay guys, I think that should wrap things up for today. If you're interested in a more in-depth review because you're deciding on which one to get, watch the video I did on the Speedmaster Reduced. Definitely let me know in the comments below if I helped you in any other way. It's always nice to hear when someone buys a watch because of my videos. It always brings a smile to my face. And as I said in the beginning, drop a thumbs up if you liked this video. Consider subscribing as it helps us out a lot. All the interesting links are down below. And I think that's it. So thank you guys for watching. Ciao.